Still to come, a murdered student, a convicted classmate, a story equal parts shocking and senseless and soon to be forgotten. And so it was. And then it became the most downloaded podcast in history. Today, a very sad anniversary in the Serial story. It's just a little after 10:30 Eastern time, right? And by this point, on this day, back in 1999, Hae Min Lee had been missing for 8 hours, and her family was frantic. Hae Min was a high school senior in Baltimore, talented, popular, and beautiful. And 23 years ago today, when classes let out, she went to pick up her cousin from kindergarten on her way home, but she didn't make it there. She didn't go home either, or anywhere else that she usually went. Hae Min would not be seen again for 27 days, at which time her strangled body was found in a nearby urban wilderness called Lincoln Park. Well over a decade after Hae Min was laid to rest, and Syed, who was also her former boyfriend, was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life plus 30, their story helped to launch a brand new genre called the True Crime Podcast. Serial was an offshoot of the radio series This American Life, hosted by Sarah Koenig. That voice you just heard was Sarah. It debuted with season 1 and told Hae Min and Adnan story in 12 installments, which have now been downloaded 300 million times. By comparison, Agatha Christie has sold more than 2 billion books, but that's dozens of titles over more than 100 years. Anyway, Adnan, the ex-boyfriend, was arrested 2.5 weeks later after Hae Min's body was found, despite zero physical evidence against him. What police had was a claim by one of Adnan's oldest friends that Adnan had told him he was planning to kill Hae Min, had showed him her body afterwards, and asked him to help get rid of it, which the friend supposedly did. A year after that, Adnan Syed was found guilty by a jury that never heard a word about his alibi, an alibi that even Adnan had forgotten he had. We have to pause here, but you are not going to have to wait a whole week for Chapter 2, because it's coming up after this break. That's Sarah Koenig in the debut episode of her insanely popular podcast, Serial. The kid she was talking about is Adnan Syed, who was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his one-time girlfriend, Hae Min Lee, on this day, January 13th, back in 1999. I am joined now by 3 people who know this saga from the inside out. Seema Iyer is a lawyer, a journalist, and chief legal correspondent for Queen City News in Charlotte. Colin Miller teaches at the University of South Carolina Law School and co-anchors the podcast Undisclosed. His partner on Undisclosed is Rabia Chaudry, who is also a lawyer and just happens to be a close friend and champion of Adnan Syed. Welcome to all 3 of you. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Okay, so let me start with you, Rabia. You brought this whole story of your friend to Serial. How and why did that all come about? How did you think about that? Because Serial brought it to all of us.
You know, I was really frustrated with the process in the courts. At this point, I think it was like 2013. We had been through the appellate process for a decade. I had been at Adnan's trial, so I had been with this case since 1999, 2000, and I just wanted to get a journalist involved. I thought a journalist would be able to maybe help us find some new evidence, find a smoking gun, just change the trajectory of the case, and that was my only goal. I did not know at the time that this was going to be a podcast, or even what a podcast was, frankly.
Yeah, well, boy, it sure is it's the podcast. I mean, honestly, if you say podcast, a lot of people think, Serial right away. Colin, the alibi story, Asia McClain, briefly summarize that for our viewers, why this was such a significant alibi that the jury never heard.
The state's theory of the case is that Adnan kills Hae at a Best Buy about a mile away from their high school at 2:36 p.m., which is when he makes a phone call to his friend Jay Wilds. Asia McClain says, I saw Adnan Syed in the library right next to the high school between 2:20 and 2:40 p.m., which of course makes it impossible he's at the Best Buy committing this crime before 2:36 p.m.
Well, and I'll read from Asia's affidavit that was given on January 13th, this day in 99, quote, I was waiting in the Woodlawn Branch Public Library. I was waiting for a ride from my boyfriend at 2:20 when I spotted Mr. Syed and held a 15 to 20 minute conversation, which leads me to this question, Seema, as a lawyer. How do you get put away for life based on, some other kid's wild accusation?
Well, I can say that I watched Asia McClain in that February 2016 hearing, so I can speak to that best, Ashley. And that is, she remembered every detail. She was poignant. She was equally respectful with both sides when being questioned. If she didn't remember something, she said that. She was so unbelievably impenetrable. She was completely credible. And I simply do not understand, based on her testimony, I have no position on what Adnan Syed may have done or not done, but based on Asia McClain's testimony and other testimony that was given at that February 2016 hearing, I just can't believe that we're still in a position where Adnan has not gotten a new trial. I just can't say enough good things about how great she was on the stand.
Yeah. Rabia, I think that's a good question still. So then you've got, Seema, who's trained in the art, right, of law and trial, saying this was an amazing witness. Again, how does it happen that a young man is put away for life just based on someone else's accusation? Because even the cell phone pinging that the prosecutors pointed to, saying, hey, Adnan's cell phone was pinging, in Lincoln Park at that time, but the science of it was really unreliable back then, and the jury didn't hear that the science was unreliable back then. It just seems like there were so many things that really weren't done right in this trial.
Yeah, there were a lot of missteps by Adnan's defense counsel. She didn't call the alibi witness. The slight correction I want to make to your introduction is the supposition that Adnan didn't remember he had an alibi. He actually did. He told his attorney multiple times. In her notes from 1999, it says, Adnan was in the library with Asia McClain. Check Asia McClain. His attorney came back to him and said, after months, that I checked with her and she had her dates wrong. But when I spoke to Asia McClain after he was convicted, she said, no attorney ever contacted me. Nobody ever contacted me. And so Asia's a compelling witness, not just because she's so credible on the witness stand and she's no friendship with anybody in the case. She has nothing at stake, but also because her narrative has been consistent. She provided an affidavit in 2000. Ever since then, she wrote these letters to Adnan while he's in prison saying, I remember being with you, and hoping his attorney would contact her, and she never did. So yeah, it is unconscionable that the court in Maryland found that did not rise to the level of Adnan being prejudiced enough to deserve a new trial.
So, Colin, I want to ask about the fact that Adnan is a Pakistani Muslim, that he was from a conservative Muslim family, but he was quite the normal kind of American kid, the prosecutors said, meaning he, led a double life. A lot of people said that was a sort of a cultural slam and that they exploited that. So, Colin, was the cultural attacks, is it possible that was the reason the friend decided to sink him and say what he said that really ended up convicting him?
Well, there's two parts to that. So first of all, absolutely, this played a role at trial. The assistant state's attorney had to apologize for making appeals to the religion here and claiming there was a history of Muslim teenagers killing their girlfriends and fleeing the country. So that absolutely was a big factor. In terms of Jay Wilds, the alleged accomplice, it's really tough to say because he's basically a pathological liar. He changes his story every single time he talks. 3 interviews with police, testimony at 2 trials, an interview after Serial aired where he completely changed the story. So it's tough to say what's going on in Jay Wilds' head other than you can't really trust a single word that he has to say.
It's a fascinating story and a fascinating podcast. I could talk about it all night, but I'm out of time. Rabia, Colin, and Seema, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.